Good morning, welcome to the Be Better Off Show.
The Be Better Off Show.
I always say, have a great day.
Good day, everybody. Thank you so much, Andrew, for that introduction. It is an incredible pleasure to have Collette here today. I consider her, first and foremost, a business person, and we'll ask her what she considers herself, but her business story is unbelievable. If any of us think that our businesses are challenging, have a good hard look at the fashion world and we'll all be, feeling good and motivated. So I want to start with the first question today with Collette, which is just, how did you get into business?
I think, it's always a challenge is a good way, and everyone sort of, especially the banks, when I first started, there was no loans, there was no sort of formal business plan, no assistance for women. I guess I was 21 years of age, and most people in the industry said you can't do it. And that was the best challenge. Of course, when someone says you can't, but you can.
It's a good start.
So I think, that for me was something that was really important to sort of overcome a lot of those problems. And I think with, not having enough money to fund a business is probably the biggest one, but there's always ways around it. And you do gravitate towards the people that believe in you. And I just took on extra work, and I almost was working, 20-hour days and funding my business through still working in film and costume design and almost running sort of two careers at the same time.
So you started selling in the markets?
No, I didn't. This is kind of, one of those, that's where Google gets it wrong. No, I didn't. I was working in costume design, and then I started making a lingerie collection that I showed to the magazine editors, and it sort of took off from there. And most Australian stores, in fact, I couldn't find one that would buy the product. Another challenge. So I was at the time in America, and I can remember seeing Barney's department store for the first time and thinking, they actually get it, and I managed to get an appointment, and they bought the product straight up. And I think it's a classic story of, let people go overseas to get their recognition, and then they come back and suddenly they're cradled. But and then I opened my own store as well in Australia, William Street, and that's where I think the business sort of took off, because I kind of had an international showcase as well as one that was local. Sort of people could walk past, and the brand sort of started to grow, I guess, from that.
Now, I remember in talking to you that often people...
Oh, isn't it? Okay, sorry.
We'll see how they get... Often people ask me, how hard do you need to work to build a successful business like that, Collette, in those early days?
You have to work hard. In fact, there was a line down the bottom of your poster, I think it says something along the lines of, I want to work less, enjoy my life, no stress at work. And I was thinking, who is that? How do I find that? It's not. You're always stressed, but it has to be a good stress, I think. And I find I actually work better under stress if I have 5 or 6 projects at once, because I'm kind of multitasking. When I only have one thing, it's sort of like doing homework. It's, I never want to do it. I clean up the office instead. So. But I think, people do work hard if you have your own business, because if you're passionate about what you do, it's not really like hard work. It's about what you need to do to get the job done, and, you have a vision. So
you had your vision, your own look. Where did that come from?
Well, I guess, as a creative, that was something I saw as a collection, what I thought was what looked good, and I was a designer always, and I studied design, so I had the bones of how to work the industry. It wasn't something that I just had an idea and sort of launched with that. I did specifically study design and fashion and clothes and textiles, so and I did work for a few companies beforehand that I was very disappointed in, because a lot of them they were plagiarists, and they really did go overseas, buy sample collections and copy them in Australia and put them out under another brand. And I think the one thing about, especially Australian Fashion Week here in our industry has kind of matured a lot, is that it hasn't been, that plagiarism has really been addressed. And I think in a lot of industries, being more global, is that you can't be like that anymore. So creative people have, and even good business people, everybody in their own rights have started to be celebrated for what they've achieved and what they do. And with the world changing so quickly, I think with YouTube, everyone has an opportunity to put yourself out there.
So it's a very interesting point, because often people see the changes in technology as being difficult for businesses, but you can see that particularly in the creative space, there's now an opportunity to speak to a global audience and to show your thing.
Yeah, but I think it depends on where your business is at, because if your business is young and you don't have a lot of infrastructure and you don't have a lot of staff and you don't have a lot of policies and in place, it's a lot easier to grab technology and move with it because it's the leading way of your business. But if you're living sort of back in from the 40s, it's kind of very difficult if you haven't maintained the updating your different, whether it's going to email to computers, and I think a lot of the original tradespeople and craftspeople have lost their businesses because they're not able to compete. And even in medium-sized businesses, I mean, there's so many things that everyone said, you had to be a .com, and then, you had to, everyone had to be online and do digital media. Yes, to a certain point, but I think the focus of so many businesses was too much about digital being online, that they weren't actually focusing on the creative and how they deliver the message and how they make it exciting and surprising and fun, and they're losing what their business was about in the first place. So it's really difficult to find the balance and what you do apply to your business, and no one can really tell you. It's like interest rates and foreign exchange. Is it going to go up? Was it going to go down? And always hindsight's wonderful. But
so is paranoia helpful in business? In this sense?
No, not paranoia. No, that's not helpful.
But being constantly on the lookout for how to better express your idea.
I think you kind of stumble across it. You'd rather, otherwise, as I said, especially, and you alluded to it before, my industry, it's like we have so much. I have to design the fabric, and then I have to design the collection, and then we have to transport it to Paris, and we have a whole team of people that are creative, and we show. Then we do the sales, and then after we've done the sales, it's a whole other dynamic and another team of people. We then have to order the fabric and then do the production, and anything could happen in India. We could lose the container, or the parcel goes missing, and you've invested in 6 months from designing, and you've lost your production, and we're responsible for it. So it's a very complex business with a lot of different personalities, a lot of female, and a lot of, and a lot of the men are kind of female, sort of in a way too. So we don't
They're very particular people, are they?
Yeah, well, no, it's not that particular. They're very, feminine maybe, and emotionally drawn to the business. And that's the one thing I always sort of think sometimes, if we only worked in a law firm, everybody would kind of be on the same playing field, the same degree, and, emotions taken out of everything, but it's not as much fun, I don't think.
So that's interesting. You meet business people, they say, the biggest challenge in my business are my people. And I always think that's funny, we've got great people, but how did you manage, such a diverse group of people, from people who are designers to people who are in production, different types of people, 2 shows a year? How did you do that?
Probably not very well.
Right.
I don't know. I'm a people person, but I find it very difficult. It's like everything, when you have a contract, the contract works when there's nothing wrong. The minute something starts to go wrong in business, you pick the contract to bits, and I think it's like everything. I always thought I had an amazing team, which I did most of the time, but then there would be one person and there would be like a cancer, and it would be, you'd either find them too late or believe in them because you wanted to believe, and then you wouldn't get rid of them quickly enough. And I think that's probably the biggest lesson I've learned, is not to believe in where I want to see people go, is to actually read the situation, and if somebody isn't right for the business, you've got to cut, no matter how difficult it is, because the influence they have on others that don't have the same amount of confidence, or, it's really bad. And I think that's especially too for, sometimes it's not necessarily work. It might be because we've had to change the way our business operates for all those reasons I talked about before, and they don't want to, or they're going through a bad personal time in their life, but it's just that they're not right for the business anymore. And, and I do think people have a life, and now that life seems to be shorter and shorter, and I'm the first person, who wants consistency and have history, because my business, like especially now, is built on history, and so that's difficult, and I think that's been my biggest mistake, is never letting people go when they should.
You should. So tell us about the change that you've made. I think it was 18 or 19 years, your couture shows in Paris, and then all of a sudden, quite a change in direction. How did you have the confidence to do that, and what was going through your mind to bring that about?
Oh gosh, it was a very, very personal decision, and a very, very difficult one, because it could go anyway. You could sort of plan it now, and it could take a total change. And also depends on what's in the media, in the news that day. Something might, a journalist might have written a great story, and then it gets left behind, or it's taken in a different way. So for me, it was really about having my second child, and he's a little boy, and he's very different to my little girl, and I couldn't do both, and not very well.
Yeah.
And I think, I find sometimes, even though I go home and cook, and like most mothers, do the washing, and you've got another job when you get home, it's
not just all glamour.
I quite enjoy doing the washing, though. I have to say, I find it really relaxing. You don't have to talk to anybody.
Yep.
It's easy. Yeah, my husband says he enjoys it too, but then he asked me how he puts the washing machine liquid in last week when I was away. I was like, oh yeah, right. But I think so for me it was really about not necessarily not working, and I think that's sort of, most people have taken it as that, and sort of wanting to be with my family. Of course I do, but I want to be able to choose when I can be with my family, and in school holidays build my work life around that, whereas before Paris was always, I was January, February in Paris, so I was always out of summer, and then it would be the same again in October, and I never got to spend time with the family when it was school holidays. So I think, and it was a risky thing too, because it was really changing my business model. I don't think anyone's ever changed it in such a way in Australia, not even maybe internationally either. So
for the audience, can you better describe, what you saw your business as, and then the change you made, and what you see it as now?
Well, it was a business that I was talking about before, where we did the design, the sales, the manufacturing. We showed in Paris. We did all the press and marketing. We did absolutely everything: packaging, distribution. We had retail stores. We had online stores, sold to department stores. Very strict, though, in my terms of trade. I never, ever, except for maybe 2 or 3 businesses, one being David Jones, give credit. It was, in fact, even with David Jones, we had our own concession model, so we controlled the stock and the staff and the training. But I never gave credit to stores internationally unless I'd been with them for a very long time, and strategically thought, well, I won't put too much money there, but they're a very good store for us to be in, because sometimes they drive other business. Yeah. And so with that, it was a lot for me to run, and it was really difficult in Australia because I couldn't find a CEO or managing director or anybody to run the business for me who had that international retail experience, overseas manufacturing, as well as a local retail market. And anyone that I found that was great internationally kind of didn't want to look at the Australian market as anything too important. It was kind of, backyard stuff. Yeah. And anybody who was great here just didn't understand the international market. And so it was a very difficult balance. And of course, because I grew up with the business, it was always on my instinct, and was always me knowing where we should go, what we should do. And so when I decided to pull everything away, it was a very big decision, because I didn't just take away my sales side, because you have to really cut your staff in a big way. And I've always believed if you're going to do something, do it in a big way. Don't sort of filter it through, because the message isn't strong. And I've stopped, I had Collette by Collette Dinnigan diffusion line that we sold. It was quite a big turnover business, and that was very successful. So I stopped that. I stopped my main line, which was Collette Dinnigan, that was shown out of Paris. And that we had 7, 8 retail stores, including London, and we sold all over the world with that brand. And my lingerie brand and my bridal brand, and we also had a children's wear brand, so everything got stopped. So it was very drastic, I guess. But then I wanted to make I believed in what I did for design, and I've always been really the only designer in the business. And it was to become a design centre, because costs in Australia are just so, they're outrageous for a manufacturing business. And that's, another thing that just always upset me, is that everybody wants to be paid a good income, which is fair enough, and eat well, but nobody wants to pay for clothes, and it's what it takes to have a business, where you're manufacturing in Australia. Everybody has to be on a good salary, because you want the best people. So it was also becoming too costly. I could see that in the future, and I didn't want to move everything to China. So, that was another reason. And so when I did that, I sort of decided just to become a designer, use my archives, have the model of if somebody wanted to come to me, or I could start again, not sell the business. I own all my IP. It's all moved offshore, so it's in a separate company, so no one can touch it here. We're very vigilant on trademarks and the way the business is now, and who we do work with. I'm very, very staunch in making sure they're ethically good companies, and
so how many people
environmentally.
did you employ in the past, and then how many do you employ now?
I had 150, sort of between our head office and infrastructure, and retail's different because that was another, whole team. And then we had agents all around the world as well, who I didn't consider as employees because they were all contracted. And now I have five people.
So just so everyone knows, it's obviously a massive change in your business. I'm conscious of the people down there that I've got my back to. I'm sorry.
I feel the same.
But it's a huge, it's a huge change, and I think it takes massive courage. So where does the courage come from?
I think it's your upbringing, or it's the challenges or things that happen to you that are very emotionally upsetting, because you want to prove people wrong, or your parents believe in you, and I think that's the most important thing, is to have the confidence to believe in yourself or an idea, but also to have the courage, if you feel like you've made a mistake or you're doing something wrong, is to actually talk about it, but talk to the right people about it, because I think, and it's really sad, because particularly in Australia, I think there's a lot of people that aren't as supportive as, for instance, like if I'm in America or even in France, so many people were supportive of my business, but I would never find that same sort of local support. It's different when your business is recognised, but in the early days it wasn't, come on, we'll help you, give it a go,
So how did you get through those times? Is it just sheer determination?
I was very careful, with my money and how I spent it, and I think I was very focused on not living a high life, and everything went back into the business, and the cash flow was very tight, and so apart from working hard, it was actually also just kind of, I guess, doing very basic budgets in your head of what something cost and what you could make out of it, and a very rough percentage at the end of the day of what I could save to go the next step. And I think having the retail stores as well, though it worked out very quickly, your margin was a lot higher than just wholesaling, and I think it's so important to have, in any business where you've got goods to sell, to have the model where you actually have control of your own space and how you present, a greater margin, to have wholesale customers, so when retail falls, you still have a guaranteed order, which you can, use as economy of scale, because in your manufacturing costs, you need to keep them at a certain level with your quantities. And then I guess welcome to the, world of online, and it's something immediate, and that's always a surprise. So I always saw that as my kind of cream. It was like, it was never planned or budgeted like a shop, and even though I was told I needed to do that because of stock and everything, I just saw it as the kind of the bonus.
The bonus. So the brand became globally famous. There's a great story, I think, about Halle Berry's dress. Could you share that with the team in terms of, because I think it really highlights how you accessed a global audience, but in a really hands-on, desperate sort of desperate must do it now, like must deliver the dress into desperate rush to get it there.
I think it's like I never take no.
Yeah.
And I think any good business person doesn't really. There's always a way. So when someone says to you, "Oh, I didn't have your phone number. I didn't know how to get hold of you," it's like, well, they're not the person you want to employ. No initiative and no common sense. You either know where someone works, or you know a connection. And I think the story is probably a classic, not so much on my side, but in my business, all the stars have stylists, and they're all dressed to go to the Oscars or a movie premiere, and it's another whole big business itself. And it was a classic example of the stylist, Philip Block. He managed to get my mobile number, which was, a private number. Yeah. And I can remember I had just moved into my house and I was shopping in the supermarket. It was a Sunday or something. It was the most inconvenient time to be called. And I actually said, "No, I can't do that dress. Look, thank you so much for the offer. It's going to be fantastic, I'm sure. But, there's only, like, sometimes too, when you're not an advertiser, you're not a big brand, you have a 5% chance, really, of a star who's an international profile. And Halle Berry was doing Die Another Day, so, she was kind of very sexy, sort of silhouette up there on stage, down the red carpet. And everybody wants to dress her. And I had to say no, because it was just, I didn't have family then. It was just too difficult. But he did talk me into it. And then what do we do? Go and get the dress, go into the office, go out to the airport, send in a DHL satchel, whatever. And then I can remember having calls the next morning from the press, maybe it was Sunday night American time or Monday, whenever. they were absolutely convinced that she would, and I was told by the stylist, I'm really sorry, thank you so much for sending that dress, but it's a little bit risky and it's not really quite appropriate. And I said, well, thank you, no problem anyway, thanks for being honest. And so go about my day, and then the next day, all of the channels, TV channels in America, everywhere were calling about the dress. And I had to say, I'm so sorry, it's not my dress. So I was getting credited for this dress because I obviously hadn't changed the press release or something around the world. And then in the end, I finally had to say, well, can you show me the dress? And it was my dress. And so I'd been saying to all the press and everybody, can they just get a life? Like somebody's made an error and everything.
I was already crushed.
Yeah, and all they wanted to know was she wearing any underwear under the dress? Because it was a perfect colour. And they didn't really, but it was just an example of just right time, right place. She looked amazing. It was perfect for her. And the skin colour of the lining was perfectly her colour of, absolutely matched. So, as soon as I answered that question, I can't even remember what I said. No one was interested anymore. I probably said yes, she was.
And what was the impact?
No, she wasn't.
Yeah. My dresses come with no underwear. What was the impact on the brand?
Oh, I think it's like when you get any person or any company that chooses to endorse you without having to pay for it, it's it's worth spades. It's like just even the Powerhouse Museum exhibition now, you can't go and buy an exhibition. Yeah. So it's an endorsement for a brand or a company that is invaluable. And I think, it's become the world of the celebrity, which I think is quite sad, because so often, there is a lot more out there than just getting a celebrity to wear your clothes. And in fact, it's kind of prohibitive now for even someone like my company to dress a celebrity, because they're all signed up with the big companies and they're paid a lot of money to not wear any other brands now. So I was fortunate. I was kind of at the beginning of that whole wave where, the actresses and musicians wanted something that was different and a smaller run of something a bit more unique, and my clothes were very suitable. Whereas now, even if I wanted, Taylor Swift, she wore so many of my dresses where she's probably signed to a company now where she is not allowed to wear other dresses. So it's a whole other business, actually.
Excellent. Now, the biggest lesson learned to date in your business? Because you're still young and doing different things. What's the biggest lesson?
I think what I said before, it's like, when you've got a great team, you have to encompass them and give them ownership and look after them. But when you've got someone that's wrong, you've got to cut. It's just the worst thing, because you don't have time to micromanage, but you still need to listen. And, for me, sometimes my just being in the business and being on the retail floor and talking to the cleaner, I'll know more about what's happening in my business than I will by talking to the managers who have a filter process. And I think, you need to be available to talk and to listen and also make decisions that are hard. And even though I want to be everyone's friend, I'm really not. Yeah. It's like, I'm there to lead the company and to make decisions that perhaps maybe some people won't like, but ultimately it's, in the long run, it's the best thing for the company.
Now share with us, if you would, the projects you're working on at the moment.
Right.
Because they're so diverse and very interesting.
I guess this is my whole new business model now. It's designing, and I did a project recently in the last few weeks, I think, and I got, I could have got a lot of flack for it, but I believed in it. It was with Aldi, and I think, my brand is synonymous with, couture and French fashion, and it's whereas Aldi, they do the most brilliant newsletters now. I've signed up for them, but everything is about price point. There's no retail, there's no merchandising. It's actually appalling if you were to think about it in the old way. But the whole idea is that people actually want good value, and they have good value. And I thought what I wanted to prove was, good design and good value. It doesn't have to cost a lot. Yeah. And I wanted to make my product accessible. It was economies of scale, because they do produce, a lot of clothes, but it was so affordable and it was so successful. I think, a lot of the Fin Review and the Sydney Morning Herald, a lot of people quoted them changing the whole landscape of retail, because customers don't necessarily want to go into a store that's discount and be paying for a bad retail experience anyway, with no one to kind of take the money and no one to help you. They're very happy to not worry about the merchandising of it and get a good quality product at a very affordable
So
price.
that came out,
especially for children.
That's sort of sold out by lunchtime right across Australia. Is that right?
Yeah, not in all stores.
Yeah.
In a lot of the stores, yes. And they had some sell-throughs of 90% on some styles across the board within a few hours. But they had bought considerable quantity of it. But I just thought, it's one example of doing good design with quality, working with ethical manufacturers, and where people can actually, it's a balance of doing that as well, which is much more, I guess the quantity is much grander, but it's like, for me, then to do something like the Powerhouse Museum, which was 2 years of a lot of work, and it was so, it wasn't agonising, but you have to be so particular. I mean, I work on everything should have been done yesterday, and they work about, they're working on everything will be preserved for tomorrow. So preserving things for tomorrow, you've got to document everything, and I mean, I think I was a whole... I changed the museum. Yeah, they said I broke every single rule that they've ever had in the museum, but you've got to sometimes. But it was, very different. And in the end, it's sort of, it's as long as you're doing something you believe in and it comes straight from, it's an instinct, isn't it, to design? Well, for me. So, and it's just how you roll it out, I guess.
Yeah. And these suites at Bannister's down in Mollywood?
I mean, I've always been very passionate about interiors, so that was something I really want to do more of, is interior design, and I am sort of doing other projects that have been in the pipeline, with Porter's Paint. Do you know Porter's Paints? Have you heard of Porter's? No. Anyway, no. I think it's maybe a female thing then. Yeah. And it's a paint finish. It's kind of like a chalky European paint, and they do, I think Dulux have just bought their business. It was very bespoke, and they make a chalky paint, and you can use it as a lime wash on buildings outside and make it look much more European. Yeah.
And you're doing something with them?
I'm just doing a wallpaper collection, and it's taken about 3 years. I mean, it's like, really...
Bit of fun.
Yeah, no, but it is. It's great, that whole interiors world. And I think, people, there will be a time now where most people are looking towards health and, and also home, and not living in such big spaces, and it's about designing places that make your homes feel tactile and comfortable and practical. And it's not that easy as, all these apartments get rolled out and people just apply the same kind of footprint to them and the formula, and they're very, actually, there's nothing with any character, and it just breaks my heart when I drive through the sea of apartments, and I feel like Sydney's lost any of its kind of, what are our children going to say when they look back? Oh, look at those apartments there, they were built in the...
Beautiful.
But I am working with different companies and have those kind of challenges and learning about the different industries. So, it's fun, and it's sort of, I'm meeting a lot of really different people who have different crafts, and, it's been good. I'm enjoying it.
So final question from me, and then some questions from the audience. I've got the standard question, which I always hate asking women because men never get asked, but balancing family, 2 careers and kids, that came from someone else. How does that go now? You're as busy as you probably ever have been, but how does it work?
Well, there isn't any balance. I don't know who made up that line anyway, because what is balance? That you work, 7 days one week and then 3 the next, and then you do an average. I mean, that's not balance. Your children need you, not when it's sort of worked out by an equation. And so I think, the decision I made to spend school holidays and kind of be in the moment, sometimes it's easier to work, but I am in the moment when I'm in the moment. And I think that's probably the most important thing, is like when you're at work, don't worry, don't spend your life on the phone back to your family. Just focus on your job and get it done and be productive. And then when you're with your family, try and, be in that moment.
Fantastic. I really want to thank Collette for coming today. I hope everyone has found her as inspiring and interesting as I have. But before we finish off, has anyone got a question? To the back, down the side. There's a question.
Thank you. I'm Elise Brown from Pharmacare. I was just wondering, when your kids are more grown up and teenagers, do you have a vision to bring back your couture line and possibly the retail stores and the shows in Paris again?
I think because I have a 3-year-old and an 11-year-old now, it's I can't see that happening for quite a few years, but you never know. Everything's possible, and I think a lot of it's just chance and where you're at and the people you meet, and sometimes if you have the right kind of support and it seems to be right, and a lot of my decisions I've made have been on gut instinct rather than formulas and things. So I would never say no. And as I'm moving away from where my business was, I don't feel like I miss it because it's a very different model, but I just don't know who I'll meet, or, you know, it might be not even based in Australia, it might be in the future, it might be European based. I don't know. It's just, the world's changing so quickly and we just don't know where we're going to be next year. I think you've just got to live in the moment and see.
Very good. There's a hand spotted near the pole.
Hello, asking another question, Tara from Dream and Do. I just wanted to ask, who has been your biggest mentor and the person that you've lent on throughout all these years?
I guess, I don't know if many of you would know, but Peter Weiss, he was in the industry many years ago, and he had Weiss Art, and even though I could imagine that his business back in the days of the 70s and 80s, he was a very big, well-known designer, but not so much, I think, for asking about his business acumen and what I should design or where I should go, but just somebody who'd been there and had a very successful business and understood the challenges of a business like mine. Well, he had the same challenges, but less so. He told me, you know, once all the import duties were dropped and he didn't have to deal with China manufacturing and everything, but he was just somebody who would make me laugh. And I think at the end of the day, you know, you don't necessarily need someone to tell you what to do. You want someone who you can kind of cry on their shoulder and they make you laugh, and they've been through it, and you almost don't even talk about it anyway. It's kind of, it's funny. But he was very important through many of my relationship breakups too. I think for a female anyway, for me it was kind of much more something that I needed guidance through than I did, you know, being in the business side of it.
Yep.
That was the easy bit.
Yeah. I get it. Got bright lights. Any other questions? Well, with that, I just want to conclude and say thank you so much to Collette for coming today. I always find her company inspiring and awesome. I hope you've enjoyed what you've heard today, and that it will encourage you in your journey, in your business, to be courageous and live in the moment.